Get ready, users. Today we're making a prop. Today's episode of DIY Prop Shop is fueled by Stoke Cold Brew Coffee. In honor of the 35th anniversary, we're going to be making a helmet from the 1982 film Tron. The way I'm going to do that is with a ton of Warbler. Just kidding. I'm going to make it all out of foam and acrylic paint. The first step is to make the helmet base. You can use a lot of different round objects to make the pattern. I'm actually going to use a bike helmet, but you could use a mannequin head, you could use your own head, whatever you have around the house. I'm going to wrap it in plastic wrap first and then tape it off so that it's easier to take off later. So now that the helmet is taped off, we can go ahead and make a pattern. A helmet pattern should be one straighter piece and two curved pieces on the sides. I'm going to draw it with a lighter marker and then a darker marker to make sure that I really keep track of the pattern lines that I want to use. Also make sure that you draw little tick marks that show where the pieces go back together. So cool. Now I'm going to transfer my pattern to paper just so that I have it for later in case I need to make a helmet again. When you trace it, don't forget to include your tick marks. So I just finished tracing my pattern using a marker and dress pins, and now I'm going to cut it out. This is just basic, cheap EVA foam from a hardware store, so it's pretty easy to cut. You could use scissors, but you'll get a much straighter, cleaner cut if you use a utility knife or a razor blade. Now my helmet is all glued together and I'm pretty happy with the fit. I can go ahead and sand down the seams to make them smooth. You can use just a cheap dollar sanding block or a Dremel tool to make it nice and smooth. I have a sander, so that's what I'm going to use. The next step is to make the neck guard, which goes on the back of the helmet. I've already made a paper pattern, which I've traced and will be available to you guys later. You can make it out of just simple craft foam, but I'm going to use this scrap of foam that's a little bit thicker. All right, it's glue time. Now my basic helmet shape is complete and I can go ahead and focus on the details. The original Tron movie used old hockey helmets, but they don't make that model anymore and they're kind of difficult to find, so we're just going to make the details out of foam. Ah, she's so cool. So now I finished making my pattern and I've cleaned it up and transferred it to paper. I'm going to cut out 2 of each piece out of foam and then attach it to the helmet. Now my helmet is completely constructed with all of the details, but the last thing to really make it look like that old hockey helmet is to poke some holes in it. So the next step before painting the helmet is to go ahead and finish the foam. I'm going to use Plasti-Dip for that. First I do a spray paint layer, and I've already done that. The problem with the spray-on kind is it sort of gives it a bubbly texture, and I really want it to be glossy and smooth. So what I'm going to do next is do a layer of the paint on Plasti-Dip. The paint on Plasti-Dip gives a much smoother finish, and you can thin it out with a little bit of Japan dryer, which will also make it dry faster. If you use Japan dryer to thin it out, make sure you have an appropriate container. It'll eat really quickly through paper or thin plastic cups. Make sure you either have a thick plastic container or a glass container. Now my helmet is all white, it's nice and smooth and ready for some circuit lines. The way I'm going to do those is to tape it off with blue painter's tape. This tape is specially for trim and baseboard, so it has really good clean edge lines. I'm going to go ahead and draw the design on and cut it out. Now my circuit pattern is all taped off and ready for paint. We're going to use acrylic for the color layer and a transparent UV paint that will glow under a black light so that it looks really awesome and just like how it does in the movie. There are a couple different ways that we could paint this helmet, either black so that it's always off and only glows when the black light is on it, or we can paint it blue so that it just kind of always looks on. I've done a paint test to see what looks better with the UV paint and decided that it just looks better on top of blue, so our helmet is always going to be on. Now that I have a layer of color on my helmet, it's time for the UV paint layer. I have a paint test to see if I can get away with just doing 1 layer of UV paint or if I'm going to need 2. And I have a little black light to test it. That doesn't do anything. We need 2 of these. That wasn't very bright. We're definitely going to need a much more intense, more awesome black light setup later, but it looks like we're going to need 2 layers of UV paint, so I'm going to put that on the helmet and then take off the tape layer. Now that all the tape is off, I can go ahead and paint in some of the smaller details, like squares and circuit ends. I'm also going to fix some of the places where the tape peeled off the paint. And that's it for the helmet. It's made entirely out of foam, acrylic paint, and UV paint, which we're gonna see glow in the dark under a black light. And if you wanna see a full costume, check out next week's episode. And if you have suggestions for what you wanna see us make next, let us know in the comments. Till next time, I'm Hendo. Thanks for making a prop with me.
Thanks again to Stoke Cold Brewed Coffee for fueling today's episode. Look at you go.